Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, we sit down with Hamas terror survivor Adele Raemer. She is from Israel, and on October 7th, she saw evil firsthand. She takes us through what unfolded, what it was like hiding for hours in her safe room, and the impact that the incursion has had on her life. With no further ado, here is Adele. Well, Adele, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. You know, you had described your life where you lived in Israel as being 95% heaven before October 7th, and that changed on that day. Take us through what unfolded.
So the evening before, on October 6th, was a perfect example of that 95% heaven, where the kibbutz where I live were a true kibbutz of pioneers. In 1946, David Ben-Gurion asked different kibbutzim to go out into the Negev desert, to go where it's barren and there's nothing there, and to build communities. So my kibbutz was one of the 11 kibbutzim that went out in the middle of the night, because there was an old Ottoman law that if you had 4 walls and a roof, they couldn't take it down. So we went out in the middle of the night and set our stakes in the Negev desert to build our community. So we always celebrate that on Simchat Torah, the holiday at the end of the period of the High Holy Days. And we were having a wonderful celebration the evening before. My daughter was in charge of it, and we had lots of visitors, and the atmosphere was festive, and everybody had a good time. And before I went to bed, my son, who was visiting, is 33 years old. I told my son, if you don't see me in the morning, when you wake up, don't worry, because I want to go take out my camera to the fields and take pictures of the wildflowers at sunrise on October 7th. Luckily, I was too tired that morning to wake up at 6:45, because if I hadn't have been too tired, I would not be sitting here and talking with you today.
Wow. So
at about 6:30, we started getting a barrage of incoming rockets. Our kibbutz is about a mile away from the border, which means that when you hear that incoming rocket warning, you know that you have between 0 to 10 seconds to get to someplace safe. 0 to 10 from the second you hear the warning until the second you hear that rocket explode. So I ran to my safe room, which is, during 95% of the time, is my guest room, and my son was sleeping in there. And we realized that this was something different because it was such a heavy barrage. And not only a heavy barrage, it was so widespread. It was from above Tel Aviv to south of us, and it was just crazy. Everybody realized that this was something different.
So you knew right away that this was not normal. This was not a normal, I mean, what you're used to with rockets. This was
so
something
I don't
bigger.
like to say used to. I like to say we know how to handle ourselves. You never get used to rocket fire. But yes, it was not what usually happens when you have rocket fire. And I only realized in retrospect that this intense rocket fire was in order to take everybody's attention away from the main event that was happening along the border in tens of spots where terrorists from Islamic Jihad and the Hamas had been planning for months, if not years, setting it all in place for the same moment to burst through the border fence and surprise attack in Israel. Only after this happened did somebody in my group, I have a Facebook group called Life on the Border with Gaza. And only after it happened did somebody in the group remind me that on September 12th, I posted an item about Hamas terrorists doing tactical practices in Gaza in a sample kibbutz in Gaza, practicing, infiltrating, capturing, killing people. September 12th. That's what they were practicing for. So I ran into the safe room, and the barrage was so intense that I was scared to stand up and close the iron sleeve on the safe room window, which protects us from shrapnel. So we waited for a while, and then we started getting messages in our internal kibbutz messaging system saying that Israel had been invaded, that we should go out and lock all our doors and our windows and go back into the safe room and lock it and stay there.
What went through your heart in that moment, in your mind, as you were reading that an invasion was happening?
So you can actually go back on my Facebook group and watch, because I did a live as I was walking around, locking the doors and the windows, saying, I don't really think this is necessary because we have the fence and the IDF are in the soldiers are out there, but I'll humor them. I didn't really take it very seriously, but I did. I locked everything, went back into my safe room. The problem is safe rooms are built to keep you safe from rockets. They don't lock. They're not built for infiltration. So we were in the safe room waiting and hoping that this is going to finish soon. And then we start getting more messages on our internal messaging system, seeing people writing that they're hearing gunfire, which is not something you would typically hear in the kibbutz. I know what rockets exploding sound like and mortars. But gunfire isn't something that we've heard in the kibbutz, and people are saying we can hear Arabic through the walls. We're a small community. We're 450 people. I know where everybody lives, and I'm following the progression of these terrorists as more and more people are writing. We hear them outside. We hear them shouting and shooting. And then it started, we hear them infiltrating our house. And they're shouting and breaking things, and they're trying to enter the safe room. And the only way you can keep that safe room locked to any extent was if you pull down the handle, because there are iron prongs that go into the frame that work to keep it locked to some extent, so that it's built so that if elsewhere in the house is impacted by a rocket, it won't implode and blow the door open. So people were standing there holding the handle down. In my safe room, I was with my son, who was visiting, luckily, and he was holding down the handle. In another safe room, a family with a 10-day-old baby, Kai, heard the terrorists entering their house, and they're saying they're setting our house on fire. And the terrorists had tried to open their door. They didn't manage to open the handle, but they bashed it hard enough so that it would get disattached from the frame to a certain extent. So when they set the house on fire, smoke was streaming into their safe room with this 10-day-old baby. And they're on the phone trying to get help from the army, from the fire department, from the police. And they're telling them, we can't get to you. Nobody's coming. So they were on the phone with somebody from Magen David Adom, who are down here today, from the Red Shield. And they were directing them what to do with Kai, to open the window a little bit, put him on the window ledge so that he'd get some fresh air, and then put him down low because smoke rises. At the same time, unbeknownst to me, because this was not being written about in the internal messaging system, my son-in-law was in his house with my 3 young grandchildren, aged 2, 6, and 8. He's one of the first responders, but he couldn't go out with the other first responders because he was on his own with the children. And he heard the terrorists entering his house. And he told the children, hide under the blanket. Don't come out. No matter what happens, you're going to hear a loud noise, but don't come out from under the blanket. It'll be okay. I'm here. He saw the handle starting to move, kicked the door open and shot the terrorist that was just outside his safe room door. He killed that terrorist. He saw 2 other terrorists escaping. He started to go after them, but then he realized that there were numerous terrorists that were highly armed outside of his house. He cut his losses, went back to protect my grandchildren.
The amount of fear and uncertainty in that moment when he's telling them, hide, you're going to be okay. And he knows he has to go out that door and engage. He has no idea what is outside. And you hear these stories and you think, how? And again, your bravery in being able to share this, because I know it's difficult to share stories like this when you could have lost your grandchildren and your family.
You know, these are stories that I heard when I was a child about the Holocaust. I'm living in my own country, in the land of Israel. We have an army. We're 2023. How is it that I'm hiding in my safe room from the Nazis of 2023 who are coming to kill me because I'm a Jew? Just because I'm a Jew, they don't have any national aspirations. If they did, they could have had a country long ago, numerous times. They're just there to kill us. They want us gone. When they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's a genocidal war cry, and I take them at their word.
I think October 7th proved, as have other events in the past, the Holocaust, as you mentioned, but October 7th proved that this iteration of evil and hatred is very much willing to act on what they're claiming to want to see happen.
Very much alive.
When were you able to come out of the safe room? And when were you able to then really process the full extent of what happened in your community?
I still haven't processed. New information keeps coming out all the time. But on that day, the soldiers arrived at 1:30 on Nirim, 7 hours after it began. They went to the corners of the kibbutz that were most in danger, where baby Kai was in the burning house, where my son-in-law was. And they went from house to house, killing terrorists, saving people that could be saved. Not all of them could be saved. One visitor was with his girlfriend in his safe room. He was holding down the door and they shot through the door and wounded him. He bled to death because it took so long for them to come. So we got word in the internal messaging system that the IDF were there, but still we didn't know how many terrorists were still loose, rampaging through the community. At one point earlier in the day, I'm sitting in the safe room with my son, and he hears a noise that he didn't know to identify. I didn't hear it. I'm hearing impaired, which makes it all the more scary because you know that your senses protect you. So I know that there are noises that I should be hearing and I'm not. He heard this noise, and then he heard in Arabic, somebody saying, "Come away from there." And we didn't understand what that was. About an hour later, I left my safe room because I was in physical pain already. I had to go to the bathroom. There's no bathroom in the safe room. I wasn't going to do it for my son. I opened the door very gently in case there were terrorists in the house. And I saw that the window across from me, the slats had been broken. So what we had heard earlier were terrorists starting to infiltrate my house. Whether it be dumb luck or divine intervention or my late husband watching over us, I don't know. But they moved on. A family 2 houses down from me, a a 79-year-old mother, Hannah, and her son, Nadav, were kidnapped around the same time. So it could be, in my brain, I have nobody to corroborate this, but it could be that they were being kidnapped at the same time. So this is Nadav, who is still in the bowels of Gaza, the terror tunnels of Gaza, and Yegev Buchstav, who was also kidnapped from my kibbutz. 5 people from my kibbutz were kidnapped, and they've been there 139 days.
All 5. Nobody has made it out.
These 2 are still in there. Okay. The other 3 were women, his mother, his wife, and a visitor, on Nirim, who were released in November. But they're still there. And we're not going to be able to start healing until our people are home. All 134 of them. And as each day goes by, the chances of all of them surviving get less and less. I have friends there, personal friends, who are there. They're in need of medication. They're not getting the medication. They're in their 70s and 80s. I don't know if they're still alive even. 2 of my very close friends, Judy and Gadi, from Kibbutz Nir Oz right next door, were out on a sunrise walk that morning, and they were shot. We have recordings of them calling for help. Judy saying that her husband was shot and he's in bad shape, and he was shot in the head, she was shot in the arm and the face, and calling for help, and nobody was able to come to save them.
What do you think took so long for help to arrive? That was a question I know people have had.
So they're going to have to do some very serious investigation on what happened that day. As far as I know, the IDF relied too much on technology. And the terrorists knocked out at the same time. It was a very well-coordinated attack. And they knocked out, as they were breaking through, they knocked out the cameras. So they were caught totally by surprise. There's an army base 5 minutes away from me.
Wow.
Those are the people that were supposed to come and save us. They were slaughtered. They were surprised and slaughtered. The southern commander of the commander of that base in the entire southern region was from that base. He knew something was going on. He sensed that something was going on. He took 2 soldiers with him, and they drove out in the morning to see what was happening. As they passed my kibbutz, they realized that the terrorists were already in the kibbutz, and he was, in fact, the first boots on the ground at 7 o'clock in the morning that went in there and courageously faced these monsters. He fought against the Nukhba terrorists that were in there. He killed some of the leaders, but in the end he was wounded, and they killed him and the 2 terrorists that were the 2 soldiers that were with him. The terrorist leaders that were left realized that they had somebody important with them. They threw their bodies onto a vehicle and drove back into Gaza in order to get credit for having killed them. So this is one of the little miracles. There were many terrible tragedies that day, but also a number of little miracles that prevented Nirim from being like Nir Oz. A mile away, they lost 1 out of every 4 of the people there. 1 of every 4 captured, slaughtered, disappeared. So this was one of those miracles. They had no leaders left in Nirim, so they just went and shot and slaughtered and burnt and destroyed whatever they could randomly. There was no rhyme, no reason. They didn't have the plan anymore. They just did what damage they could.
So I have to ask you, I don't know where you were spiritually with your faith before this. I'm curious to know how this impacted you in that respect, how you look at God and your faith, and just even you mentioned, I don't know if it was divine intervention or something else that protected you that day.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm very confused. Where was God on October 7th? Where was he when my friends were being slaughtered? So many Israelis were slaughtered that day. 240 Israelis kidnapped, brought to the hell of Gaza. Where was God? I don't know. I can't. I'd rather not deal with that question because
you're processing still everything that unfolded. And as you said, you haven't had a chance to really fully process it. It's still very much happening. People are still in captivity.
You know, I look at the TV in Israel and the different reports that they're doing, and I know that one. I know that one. That was my student. That was the parent of a student. I know so many. This is so personal. We're a small area, a small region, a small community. This is so personal for me. So many good people. Judy taught mindfulness. She taught English. She was the sweetest, most wonderful person, funny. 70-year-old woman and her 72-year-old husband. What did they do to deserve being slaughtered like that?
You know, there are a lot of people around the world who have a lot of different opinions and thoughts. And, you know, that's a whole other element. You're dealing with the real life, what happened, processing it, trying to educate people. And you have a lot of people criticizing Israel, saying different things about what unfolded, even people almost being apologists or excusing what happened on October 7th. What is it like for you? What is your message to those people in light of what you have faced and what you continue to endure?
For some reason, the monsters that came over thought it was justifiable to come and slaughter people who never did anything but held out their hand in peace. There are people from my community who volunteer their time to drive over to the border, to take Gazans who are coming into Israel to go to Israeli hospitals to be healed, and to transport them to the hospitals and bring them back. I personally have been in touch with Gazans and have done educational activities to help teach their children and ours that the person on the other side is not their enemy. So many peace activists come out of our communities. Those are the people they thought they should come over and slaughter? There's and all of the stories that you hear, they flip. They're just flipping them and saying that we're committing genocide. The genocide attempt was on October 7th. They didn't hide it. I don't know if you saw the movie, the 45-minute documentary. They were proud of it. They bragged about it. They called home and told their parents, I just decapitated an Israeli. And the parents cheered. The Western world doesn't understand what we're up against. And the Western world really needs to understand that, because we're just the first course. We're just the appetizer. The West is next.
Adele, I so appreciate you taking the time today talking with us. Is there anything that we didn't get to say that you want to say?
Yes, absolutely. So on October 7th, we faced an existential threat to our bodies, our lives. Today, we face an existential threat to our communities because we're dispersed. We're refugees in our own home, in our own land. We cannot go back home to live yet. We don't know when we can. But we're working on it, and we have to raise money and rebuild our communities and make them bigger and better and stronger.
And safer.
And safer. And in order to get back to my community, I have to regain the resilience that I had on October 6th when I intended to go out and take pictures of the wildflowers. And not just the sense of resilience, but a real solid sense of security. And I'm just so grateful for all of the help that we're getting. We have been getting a few days after we arrived, the International Federation of Christians and Jews sent all of us vouchers, these credit cards with money so that we could go buy clothing. Because many of us, like my daughter, left with just the clothing on her back. So we were able to go out and buy clothing and buy things that we didn't have. I have everything I need. but it's at home. So I'm grateful for the international community, for Am Yisrael, for the Israeli community that stepped up and did so much to help us, and the love that I'm getting and support that I'm getting here at this conference from the international community of Christians is just so inspiring. I grew up here. I didn't feel that love when I was growing up, but I'm feeling it now. And it is just so inspiring and so healing and helpful. And I want to thank people for that.
Well,
and to invite them to come to Israel, because I need your support. I need you guys to tell the world. And look what's going on in this country. And even President Biden, who was so wonderful at the beginning, now is talking about ceasefire. No, we can't do this yet. We have to be allowed to finish the job.
the words over the top were actually used at one point, that Israel was going over the top.
Israel is the only army in the world that is so careful about preserving and respecting the lives of innocents. Innocents die in war, and that's the tragedy of war. But they do everything that they can to prevent it. They had human passage areas for people to be able to pass through that they were guarding, because the Hamas terrorists were shooting down Gazans that were trying to get away. The IDF went and protected the Gazans to enable them to get out of the war zone. The world and the American government has to trust Israel to do what needs to be done.
Well, I want to thank you for your bravery in speaking up and sharing a very difficult story to share at a time where it's very difficult to do it, and it's very personal, raw, and new for you still. That is a lot of bravery and heroism, so appreciate that today. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for raising our voices.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.